let's keep this train moving along. What we wanted to do next was talk a little bit about some of the newer capabilities that we put in CMapsAnalytics version 4, because I know we have a number of folks watching live and who will be watching the recording who are looking at building solutions like Arceus and Launchworks. So Evan, I'll hand over control and you can take it away. What's new in CMapsAnalytics v4?
Cool, thanks, man. Get this into presentation mode. So I just wanted to go about a few select features out of the new release. The first one, which is this CMap.register marker renderer. So in the past, we've already provided a decent library of like, a few dozen icons that handle basic stuff like if you want to see a person on the map or a house or a lightning bolt or electricity or something along those lines, we've got you covered. And for those markers that we render out to canvas, you can apply alerts to them, change their colors, their opacity, their stroke style, their fill style, their size, their position on the map, you name it. With that said, though, we've always had customers over the years want to provide their custom artwork. We've been able to support that to a certain extent, but it's been kind of lame because they can only submit PRGs or JPEGs, which is, unacceptable and kind of non-performant. So now we've never really had a good way to expose our SVG and canvas rendering before, but that is exactly what this function does. So if you call register marker renderer, you pass it a JavaScript object with two fields name. The first field name is the custom icon name, which is just custom : then whatever the icon name is. And aside from that is a render function, and this render function gets called back every time a map point gets plotted on the map using this icon. So in this, let me go to meeting out of the way for a second. So in this, we provide you a render obj parameter, which basically contains all of the pertinent information that you need to render something on the map, such as the stroke style, the fill style, the opacity, the size, and whether it's visible or not. So essentially, we pass you this render object, and it's up to you within the side, within the guts of this function, how you want to draw something to the canvas or how you want to draw an object to the SVG. The inners of this function are a little bit different because of the different natures of the SVG and canvas technology, but they follow the same sort of paradigm. It's the same function, and just the object that you return for an SVG is a little bit different. And a silver lining to allowing custom rendering to where you can draw whatever you want on the map is that our mouse event handling is handled a layer above this. So, all you have to do is render stuff, and as far as mouse over or click or hover events on these various canvas or SVG objects, we automatically handle. And below are two code pin links out to the SVG and canvas examples, respectively. Next up, we've got our new data import and field mapping process. So before, we kind of had a rudimentary sort of drag and drop field mapping that wasn't too user-friendly or obvious to use. So we've replaced that with a data wizard, which basically determines the columns in your data, allows you to step through them and assign them to a given map property. You can assign a meaningful name to it as well. And basically, that is the new user-friendly mapping process. So that's just like a UX enhancement to make everyone's life easier and more straightforward. As far as a new feature that came with this is that we now support an unlimited number of data measures. So we've always had customers ask us to be able to have multiple measures in their data, and basically at runtime during the map, be able to toggle through those measures and just see the results of those. So now we support like 110 measures through the designer, but we support an unlimited number of measures through the API. And beyond that, we've made some tweaks in our custom components or SAP integrations to kind of make this easier. And we also provide info window widgets out of the box that you can actually view the source code for if you're so inclined, that shows you how we swap through the measures. It's really pretty simple. Next up, we've got our category alerts. So we've supported a category, dimension, or column in our data for a long time, but we've never done anything with it in regards to alerts. So now if you go to the Layers tab, you'll find a new category alerts section, and it's pretty dirt simple the way that it works. So you type in any number of alert levels that you want, and then for each one of those alert levels, you essentially define a color and an icon pin style. And this works for shapes or any other object in the map. It's not just for pins. So the deal is that if you've got categories defined in your data, whenever it finds a matching category record, you get these colors and or icon treatments if those are relevant to the type of layer that you're displaying. So like I mentioned, if it's not acceptable to hand jam, all of your categories in Designer at the same time, or if you don't know them ahead of time, you can feed them through the API, and we've made changes through our integrations to make this a seamless process to where you can include categories in your data and basically leverage these alerts dynamically. After this, we've got a time dimension. So now we support a time column in our data feed, and it can basically be any legitimate time or time and date string. So whenever you feed that into your data, basically what we provide is an out-of-the-box info window widget that allows you to basically slice and filter by time. And not only that, but also select a millisecond or second interval to play the kind of animations out of time. And this works for all different layer types. And not only do we provide this info widget for you to use, but the source code is completely transparent. So you can see that how we wired it up, and it's pretty short and sweet. And underneath this widget, aside from that, really importantly, is that a ton of new time analysis features were added to the API. So anything that you want to do for time analysis, we really tried to step out of your way and not be the bottleneck for this, so that you can develop against our API whatever you need for time. There's some pretty easy to use time functionalities in there, and I encourage you to check it out if this is an important feature to you. Almost there. So this is one of the last ones, which is cluster by different units of measure. So historically, we've been basically doing an auto cluster, which is sort of a murky term that equals us choosing a hard-coded number of meters out from any given point that we use to start to kind of bring the different nearby points together. So we've done this for years, and it's worked for years, and no one has really questioned how the auto stuff works. It just kind of works for them. But recently, we've had a partner approach us where their customers need much more fine-grained, just definite control over how these clusters are being generated and glommed together. So, of course, we still support the auto approach, which is what everyone has been using, but we also support pixels, meters, miles, and kilometers, which enables you to specify super-duper precise radius values that you want to cluster your markers. And to implement this functionality, we've implemented a new cluster options method on the map. And as you can see, it takes an array of objects. And each one of these objects inside can correspond to a given cluster-enabled layer on the map. So that for each cluster-enabled layer on the map, you can specify for it, oops, skipped a few back. You can specify for it to have any unit of measure and different radius values, so you can kind of tweak these things across cluster-enabled layers, as you need. And down here is a code pen that basically is a functional container where you can go and play around with the stuff and see how it gets used. The next feature is GeoJSON improvements. So for a long time, we've supported GeoJSON, but it's kind of had a couple of shortcomings. Number one, we made you provide us with a GeoJSON URL, which works okay during the lifetime of the map, because after we consume a GeoJSON URL, we do our best to cache it and make it as performant as possible. However, due to some of the partner integrations and other integrations that we support, sometimes your component can basically live in a self-contained iframe. Wherever the parent application refreshes its data, your component gets blown away to a certain extent. It either gets diminished or completely destroyed to the point where you have to rebuild it. And if your map has a bunch of GeoJSON feeds every time the data gets refreshed from SAP, guess what? You're rebuilding your map and you're fetching all of those remote GeoJSON feeds, which definitely brings down the user experience, makes us look bad, and is just not cool. So basically, to step out of your way and to no longer be the GeoJSON bottleneck, and to basically just give you free reign for how you want to manage these things, we now allow the map to directly consume GeoJSON as a raw string or as an object. And everything works exactly the same. So for example, if you wanted to store this in SQLite or some kind of local storage or remote storage or whatever, that should be a lot skin off your back as far as network time. Last but not least, so before in a GeoJSON file, all we ever cared about was harvesting the location or geometry data out of that file, because we always assumed, just based on previous experience in SAP, it's just sort of always been that way, where we take locations and then the business data comes from a separate business system. So labels, values, drill IDs, all of that kind of pertinent business information, we always assumed came from a different source. However, we have recently had a partner request where it was very useful for them to be able to essentially harvest metadata from a GeoJSON file and map those to map properties. And that's what this is. So layers options is just kind of a, oops, let me get back to there. Layer options is kind of a generic catch-all for some JavaScript objects that make decisions for different layers or tweak how they behave. So this one, for example, if you're feeding it a raw GeoJSON file or GeoJSON file for a URL, and you want to be able to use the metadata corresponding to the GeoJSON records in that file, here's all you have to do. Provide a GeoJSON to MapsProp object, which accepts an array, and inside of that array are just colon delimited strings that show what map property should map what to GeoJSON property. So if you want to map your map labels for this layer to the name property in a GeoJSON field, that's done. If you want to map your drill IDs to a GeoID, that's done. Values of the map to the census area, numeric values of the GeoJSON field, totally done. So now, between being able to utilize all of the fields from a GeoJSON field, as well as us stepping out of your way and allowing you to cache or kind of performance tune things different, based on your different integration scenarios, this is a pretty solid improvement. So that's it for improvements. And up next, I believe that I am passing back to Ryan or Deepu. And thank you guys so much for your time. If you have any questions or problems that you've run across implementing this stuff, feel free to get in contact with me anytime. I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evan. So, yeah, as I mentioned, we have a number of folks who came to CMapsAnalytics 2017 as new integration partners and or developers who are building new components or solutions with CMapsAnalytics. So we wanted, as I said, we wanted to have something for everyone, right? So we have, for our SAP crew, we have our design studio. For our developer community who's come into CMaps 2017, we have, as you can see, quite a bit of functionality there. So when we talked about integrating at our core,